So in 2016, we started the RSA Conference Security Scholar Program. And this is a program where we were trying to really connect the future thought leaders with the leaders of today. So it's a tailored program, it's a curated program, and one of the other pieces of it, as you know, RSA Conference, the success comes from the fact that we do this cross-fertilization between business, academia, policy and government, and nonprofits. And this part of our ecosystem needed a little bit more highlighting. And we wanted to see what is actually happening in the universities. So when we got our 60 scholars in this year, I asked some of them if they wanted to go and do a poster pitch off. And they were so generous, and 4 of them decided to go ahead and showcase their work. So you're gonna hear that today. But before we get us started, I just wanna also thank our judges. And when I say judges, these guys are here actually just to ask more in-depth questions, learning a little bit more about the technology, maybe providing a little advice about where they should take this particular research going into the field. But as also, so I'm going to start with Jamil Jaffer, who is the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Say hi to Jamil. We have Ann Johnson, who's the corporate vice president of Microsoft Security at Microsoft. Yay! And we have Ben Jun, who is an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and now he's CEO of HVF, which I believe is just happy, fun people. Hard, valuable, and fun. Like, I think, right there, give it up for Ben. These guys have been committed to helping us each year with the students, and I'm always so grateful when these experts take the time out of their crazy RSA conference schedule to share their knowledge and ask the right kind of questions. Okay, so I just want you also to know that these scholars are going to put their heart out there. This is the work they've been working on, so you are supportive, you are loving, and you are giving them extra love. So to get us started, how it's going to work is each of the students will get 5 minutes to give a little bit of background. Oh, sorry, hold on. Weijia, you're not quite ready, but come on up. They're gonna do 5 minutes of just a little bit on research, and then we're gonna flip it over. We're gonna ask the judges to go ahead and ask 5 minutes of questions about the research and learn a little bit more. So this event is very, very tight because we have, it's a 10-minute on each student. We don't have time for questions, but if you're interested in learning more about the research afterwards, then you can go up and ask the students afterwards. So to get us started, I'm gonna invite Weijia, I got it. Weijia Yan from Carnegie Mellon, and she is going to be talking about breaking barriers, increasing diversity in CTF competition. Weijia, you go ahead, you got 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you. When I was a teenager, I dreamed about being a hacker. However, there were no resources. There were no classes in school I can find to start down that journey. I didn't have anyone in my life who could help me start down that journey. So I gave up that dream. Several years later, while starting my undergraduate degrees, I discovered a competition that teaches hands-on security skills. The competition was Pico CTF, and it was developed by Carnegie Mellon University. Pico CTF was the first CTF that I have played, and the passionate community I was playing with reignited my dream of being in cybersecurity again. 4 years later, I became a security student at the university. Throughout this journey, I've had obstacles, but there was one thing that really bothered me. I didn't see people who looked like myself. When I get started with involving in the cybersecurity club in my undergrad university, there were only 3 women in a room full of students. I was not the only one who had this problem. Last year, I had the opportunity to meet with the high school CTF team. And out of 12 students, there was only 1 girl in the CTF team, Ellie. And Ellie wanted to drop her dream of being in cybersecurity because she felt different and lonely. She felt the same way that I did. Ellie's story makes me think, why is it that we're not able to retain more girls? So I wanted to do something about it. I continued to speak at conferences to share my story and motivate others to join the industry. Recently, I teamed up with other students, Katie, Thanuga, Daniel, and David. We shared stories about how different minorities felt when trying to enter the world of information security. We found similar stories among not only women, but also other underrepresented communities, such as African Americans and Hispanic populations. We tried to understand what helps retain minorities in CTF competitions, and what can we, as an industry, to learn and retain a more diverse workforce. After receiving IRB approval, we conducted a survey asking students about their experiences with CTF competitions. We surveyed students who are 18 years and older and familiar with CTFs. We've received 30 responses, but only 24 valid responses due to our screening criteria. We studied groups who continued playing CTFs and those who started but later gave up. The survey shows that 70% of participants who continue playing CTFs say that they were motivated by the prospect of learning something new when they got started. This is similar to those who have stopped playing CTFs. We have also received some surprising results. 32 participants answered no when asked about if there are specific challenges that underrepresented groups face in CTF competitions. Half of the participants who continued playing CTFs say that there are no barriers to entry to playing CTFs, but 71% participants who have stopped playing say that half the participants who have started, 71% of participants who have stopped playing said that their lack of representation, resources, mentorship opportunities, and issues with team formation are barriers for them, especially for underrepresented minorities. And both types of participants emphasize the importance of collaborative environments and friendly, open-minded teammates for having positive experiences when playing CTFs. Training, mentorship, representation, and extra incentives for underrepresented minorities may be key to increasing retention rates for underrepresented communities. Here, I want to thank my teammates. Each of us bring a unique perspective into the team. Not only do we have people who have technical backgrounds in security CTFs, we also have people who have backgrounds in business, usability, and privacy engineering. And each of us brings a fresh perspective into the study. We also wanted to thank two groundbreaking pioneers and experts, Professor Lori Craner and Professor Hanan Hibshi, who cared deeply about the diversity in cybersecurity. Now, after using the survey to find out what keeps people interested in CTFs and what keeps people drives people away, imagine a world where people like Ellie are empowered and paving the way for future of information security. Together, we can create a world where everyone can thrive and reach their full potential. Thank you.
Very nicely done. That was right on time. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to the judges, and I see you've got the mic. You're up.
Thank you so much. What a really fascinating and interesting study, and having been a woman in cyber for 20 some odd years, I get it. So with that framework, you have the data now. So what's next, right? You have the data that shows how underrepresented minorities need more mentorship and they need more facilitation to actually continue participating in CTFs. How do we solve that? What ideas does the team have?
So the first action item that we're going to do, since this... Here we go. Can we? Okay. So the first action items we're thinking about doing is, after we have the data, after we have the research, how do we integrate this kind of recommendations or this kind of data into the platform that we have, Pico CTF? This might be something that we can increase retention rates among diversity, among underrepresented groups, in just CTF competitions, and we're hoping that this kind of results can help other CTF platforms with retention among underrepresented communities as well.
Thanks. So Weijia, I had a question. So one of the things you mentioned was a lack of mentorship, right, on these platforms and the interaction. Is it a lack of any mentors at all, or is it a lack of mentors that don't share the same background as these underrepresented groups? Do they need mentors that look and feel like them in addition to just having mentors generally?
So I don't have the statistics to back this question up, but from my own perspective, I feel like I feel like that people who look like myself, I think it would help with retention.
Great.
I want to thank you for looking at this. It's actually interesting. My Capture the Flag experiences have been bracketed. The first one I went to, I was at a conference where we had just done something really great. People wanted to take selfies with our equipment, and it was great CTF. The last one was at a conference I won't mention in Las Vegas where I said something wrong and everybody thought I was this old guy that didn't know anything. And then I left wondering if I was relevant in the industry. So it's actually interesting that how people respond to you is a huge deal. It really does reinforce how you feel. I think my question is, do you think the issue is getting people to attend, based on your data, is it getting people to attend the CTF, or is it making sure that the CTF experience is one that retains people?
Both, actually. So starting getting people into CTF is a great initiative that allows people to see what a CTF looks like. But actually retention is something that we can just help with. I think retention of people are a hard issue, especially like CTFs are not easy subjects. CTFs are hard challenges. And for people to keep being in this, keep doing challenges like that, it really, we need to have more people who are willing to like guide and help other people learn the skills that we need to just do CTFs.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have another question, or we're good? We're good. Thank you. Can everybody give a round of applause for Rachel? It's very, very important to have everybody who has stands up here. I just feel so proud of them, and so congratulations, Weijia. You did a great job. So coming up to our next poster, this is from. Can I call you Zin? Zin Ear from University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. And it is on TEMPS, a framework for enhancing decision-making in cyber operations by quantifying technological, economic, political, and societal impacts. So he is a PhD student, and I'm gonna turn it over. It's your turn, Zin. Good luck.
Good morning. So if you're thinking, like, I don't know this acronym because cybersecurity has many acronyms, you shouldn't know TEMPS yet, but hopefully you'll know it in the years to come here. So the idea and what TEMPS stands for is technological, economic, political, and societal. And I'd like to start out with a concrete example, hypothetical scenario to kind of cage our conversation here. And so imagine Russian aggression has escalated against Ukraine, perhaps not so hard to imagine. But so it's escalated to the point where the U.S. has decided to send an army regiment to go support the defense of Ukraine. And along with this, a cyber protection team has also been assigned to defend the command and control networks. So figure one there is shows the complexities of the command and control network. And if that network fails, then that kinetic activity will also fail, right? And so if before that cyber protection team conducts defensive operations, the planners of that operation need to consider some really important questions, such as how will we conduct adversarial threat modeling to paint an accurate picture of that threat landscape, and how do we measure the success, performance, and effectiveness of the cyber operation. And so we formalized these questions into a research problem. How do we enable the planning of cyber operations in a quantifiable, risk-informed approach? And so our solution to this is the TEMPS framework. And again, TEMPS stands for technological, economic, political, and societal. And to the best of our knowledge, this is the first framework that explicitly brings in those other, perhaps not necessarily STEM areas or an interdisciplinary approach to looking at cyber operations. And so the main components in figure 2 of the diagram in the, under the results side there is the TEMPS metrics, a series of metrics that helps us to understand the environment and the mission, and then applying the OODA loop for decision making to characterize and analyze the cyber operation in terms of the TEMPS metrics. And so I've been in the Army 21 years, and what I've noticed is that when we're looking at how do we define or quantify measures of performance and effectiveness, a lot of it is subjective and very much dependent on the skill set of the person around that round table, essentially. And when they're conducting COA development through COA refinement, it really is almost an ad hoc process depending on their skill level. And so our assertion is that the TEMPS framework will be able to provide a more principled, systematic, objective, and quantifiable solution. So in our study to demonstrate this, we instantiate this framework in a case study of that hypothetical scenario I brought up at first, where we observed the environment and the mission by building a precise system model, and then we orient ourselves on the adversary by conducting what-if analyses and simulation to get that quantifiable risk score in terms of the TEMPS metrics, and then we in this way, we support the planning, the refinement of the course of action, and ultimately the commander's decision and consequent action. And so from this instantiation, the results there are some percentages and risk scores, but these are not the important aspects of the result because they're really dependent on the synthetic data that we use in our manual execution of this instantiation. But what's more significant is this is a first step towards answering those tough questions. How effective was that defensive capability that you're planning to employ? And how effective was the red team's 0-day or other offensive capabilities that they're planning to thwart your defensive operations there? And so in our next steps here, what we want to do is show the automative power of our framework by developing a software tool as a proof of concept for this particular instantiation. And then what we hope in the future is we'll be able to better refine the TEMPS metrics and develop more out the OODA loop decision-making process in this regard, and then build out a full-fledged software solution to enable those planners. Thank you.
Very nice. So, Jamil, you're up.
Well, great, thanks. So, Suzanne, help me understand, how do you quantify, right, societal impact in the context of cyber operation? I get maybe economics, that's quantifiable, but how do you quantify a societal or even a technological impact?
So the technological side, maybe I'll tackle that first. In terms of, for example, the cost of, if you deploy a exquisite defense capability, such as classified malware signatures, as soon as you deploy that, now, just like a 0-day as well, now that's out in the open, that's out in the network traffic and such. So the way, one of the technological metrics there would be the loss of such capabilities on the technological side. In our team, there are actually 5 researchers on this project, and so we have an economics major, political science as well, and so I wish I could defer that first question to him, but they would the poli-sci and economics students would say that there are statistical and mathematical models that will also help in determining these, and so Graham, the economics student, actually came up with 1,500 metrics to measure this, and a lot of it which tie into the societal aspects as well. One of the difficulties that we find here from a technical perspective is how do you build a precise system model, one with so many metrics, and then the other is which of those metrics really matter. So conducting I forget what they call it, the factor analysis to make sure that we're looking at what we should be looking at. But the non-economic answer or non-societal answer for me is there are lots of methods that those experts can bring into this, and that's why we wanted this interdisciplinary approach. Thank you so much.
So, as a poli-sci major and grad, the political impact is really interesting, and it's going to be a similar question because I have the same thoughts. Your example here is you talk about the loss of 4 tank crew members, but you're talking about cybercom. So can you draw the connection between cyber war and kinetic war, which is something we clearly saw in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, and how this model could stage the impact of both on the cyber war and the kinetic war?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. That seems like a really hard question, but I think so in cybercom, what the planners always tell me is we're conducting tactical operations, typically on keyboard, very small, very seemingly small operations here, but they have strategic impact. And there are times when that impact will directly go into the kinetic world, but I think more so from a societal and political perspective that these guys on keyboard, if they hit the wrong button now, as an example, I was at NATO on the red team, and in an exercise, we thought we were in a closed network, but when we changed the GPO policy and it propagated outside of the exercise network into the actual NATO secret network. So some general in Italy is calling us up thinking, hey, World War III is about to begin because we're getting a different banner here. And so it's so easy for that tactical to reach strategic impacts. And so the quantification of that, I think, is really difficult. But I think the ties are just inherent in how everything is on social media as well. Everything's so interconnected. So from cyber to kinetic to the whole society, I think it's just an inherent thread. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for this. I haven't lived in the fog of a kinetic conflict, but I've definitely been in the situation where we've had a massive breach. Something bad is happening, there's economic damage that's occurring, people are taking money from bank accounts, we don't know why. It's a very scary place, and that's a lot of, when people talk about best practices and hiring consultants, it's because at that moment you desperately want someone to come and show you their framework. You know they can't tell you what to do automatically because you would have figured that out, but you want their framework. And as you looked at a bunch of different frameworks for how people in industry solve the problem, were there any that kind of jumped out at you and said, hey, this is something we should borrow from, or that I should copy down and follow myself?
For sure, and we're kind of stepping on the shoulders of giants here too. With the NIST cybersecurity framework was a big inspiration here. So as we're building our system model, actually, we're pulling in a lot of that compliance side, but trying to operationalize the compliance framework. The FAIR model as well, from an economic perspective, was big in our what-if analyses process there, and I think also the cybersecurity framework from NIST brings in other frameworks too. They're using 800-53 controls, which pulls in RMF. And what we wanted to cut through, though, was this compliance for compliance sake. And so trying to pull in those controls to actually align them to specific operational requirements. But I think CSF was a big one for us in this case.
All right, well, we're going to have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Good job, Zen. Okay, coming up on our third student, we have another PhD student from the University of Maryland, College Park, Julio Povedo. He's speaking on English smishers are more creative than Spanish smishers. This is not the right one. Hang on, there you go.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello? Okay.
Is it working? Great. It is 1:40 p.m. As you're heading back to your office after lunch, your phone beeps for the 50th time that day. New SMS message. There is an issue with your package delivery. You might feel a bit anxious now. Would it be possible that the jacket you ordered a few days ago has been lost? You might tap on the link, enter the requested data, and in the blink of an eye, someone might have stolen your personal information and will go for your corporate information. Hi, I am Julio, and today I invite you to think about phishing via SMS, also referred to as smishing. What makes it hard for people to identify these malicious messages is that they lack the contextual cues people normally use and look for to spot phishing emails. Although it is a widespread issue, prior work has primarily focused on understanding and studying phishing in English. In this project, we sought to study smishing from an adversary strategy perspective. This means we were interested in answering questions like, at what time of the day are adversaries sending their malicious messages? Which entities are they impersonating? What enticements are they using, like account being suspended? And are these enticements varying throughout the day? In addition, as smishing is a global issue, we wanted to identify if English and Spanish smishers follow similar strategies in order to trick users into providing their personal information, as this could yield insights into how to combat smishing at a larger scale. This is important for governments and organizations because adversaries are getting smarter. And nowadays, they have many tools that facilitate their job. Yes, ChatGPT is one of them, and it can help them craft and create personalized and targeted messages. So, in this project, we gathered sample smishing reported in English, reported by users on 3 subreddit forums. And in addition, we gathered sample smishing in Spanish posted on Twitter by the police of a Spanish-speaking country, Colombia. After consolidating our datasets, 2 researchers did content analysis. So for each sample in our dataset, we identified the time in which the message was being sent, the entity that was being impersonated, the enticement, the level of urgency that was being transmitted, and the actions users had to do, like tapping on a link. These 2 Sankey diagrams illustrate our preliminary results for our English and Spanish datasets. With respect to our English dataset, the most impersonated entities were banks, the US Postal Service, and streaming platforms like Netflix. What we noticed was, for each impersonated entity, smishers are using multiple enticements. And in fact, the use of these enticements is varying throughout the day. On the other hand, Spanish smishers used fewer enticements. And something that caught our attention from our Spanish dataset is that some impersonated entities, like family compensation funds, appeared only in the Spanish dataset. And one reason that could explain this phenomena is that there are socioeconomic differences between the 2 countries that we analyzed. Our preliminary results suggest that English and Spanish smishers do follow certain patterns. For instance, they are primarily sending their malicious messages in the afternoon and in the evening. And we also noticed that they're adapting and constantly changing their strategies. We saw sample smishing that had exactly the same text, but it had slight variations in the URL, which suggests that smishers are adapting these messages to increase their chances of succeeding. Although our dataset might be biased because it's composed of smishing reported by users on social media, we believe that this is the first step towards a better understanding of how to combat smishing globally. Future work can seek to expand our datasets and study smishing across more languages. Finally, smishing is still a problem, and by expanding our understanding of smisher strategies across different languages, we can take defense mechanisms to the next level. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm super proud of you. You did great. Everybody's doing so well. So, judges, what questions do you have for Julio?
So this is an interesting attack because it costs money to smish somebody, right? I think my numbers are it's about half a cent to send a text message with a legit provider. And if you're not legit, you can probably launder that or do something to get it a little bit down, but it's still pretty expensive. And so we have to assume that there's just an order of magnitude more work and time spent on crafting these, maybe 2 orders of magnitude, because it costs way, way less to send an email. So in your sample set, did you see evidence of people kind of hill climbing or trying to learn more about what worked? Did you see anything like in the time series? I don't know if you had the chance to look at that, but I'm interested in seeing how these things change over time and how sophisticated they are in crafting these.
That's a great question. Thank you, Ben, for this question. I have 2 things to say. First of all, in our sample, we noticed that sometimes smishers are not sending their text that says, hey, you won a prize, click here immediately. That's not the only case. We also saw samples in which smishers just say, hey, or hello, or hi, it was nice to see you yesterday. So they are trying to engage people into the conversation. And also we noticed that in some specific cases, they are trying to move the conversation to other platforms like WhatsApp. And this might be suggesting that they are realizing that their messages are being blocked by mobile operating systems like Apple, Android, etc. So they have to jump to other platforms in order to evade those blockings. And my second point that I want to highlight as well is that, and this is with respect to our Sankey diagrams, the one on the left is about English smishing. We noticed that English smishers are following more sophisticated techniques, whereas Spanish smishers are sending primarily generic messages. They're not being that smart. And this might be because of many reasons. We have a couple of hypotheses. We believe that the English smishing market is more mature than the Spanish smishing market. One possible reason is, in English-speaking countries, these countries are wealthier, and adversaries are targeting these countries, people in these countries, because these people are the ones that have more money than in other nations. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Julio. Based on your data, coming out, especially the difference between, native Spanish speakers and native English speakers, is there advice your data could give organizations about how they would train people to detect a smishing attack and make sure they don't respond to it?
Thank you, Anne, for your question. User education plays a crucial role. Yes, one strategy to combat smishing is to improve our mechanisms to block these messages, but user education is essential because we all play a crucial role to combat smishing. This is not the job of companies like Apple and Google. We all can make a difference. And what we believe needs to be made is, for example, in the context of Spanish, in Spanish, different organizations are trying to generate more awareness and educate people about this issue. But what they're doing is they're following the trainings that other nations, English-speaking nations, are creating. And sometimes this is not the best to do because smishers are using different strategies. And there are variations as well, depending on the specific country in which these messages are being sent or targeted to users. So I believe there is a great opportunity to improve user education, both in organizations and also in other institutions, because sometimes trainings are very generic, and we lose, or we are not leveraging the opportunity of personalizing this training so that we train people to combat the specific strategies that smishers are utilizing depending on the language that these users are speaking, as well as their geographical location.
So, Julio, I think this data is really interesting. You show a 2x increase in number of categories that the smishers are doing between Spanish-speaking and English-speaking countries, and a 3 to 4x difference in the type of enticements, right? So the data is really interesting. And as a recovering lawyer, we were always taught if you have something you think that that your adversary is going to say to you, right? You want to surface it up front. So you talked about bias in your data, right? And I'm wondering how much of a bias in your data comes from the fact that you were looking at subreddit forums in one case, you had 96 examples, you only had 23 for the police Twitter account. How much of that impacted your results, do you think?
Fantastic question, Jamil. Thank you so much. That's a limitation of our work. And what I want to say as well is that in the case of the 3 subreddit forums, these are subreddits in which all people can post their images to check if it's smishing or not. Whereas on Twitter, we got the information from a particular Twitter account, the Twitter of the police of a Spanish-speaking country. So what happens is the police already have their infrastructure and services to detect smishing, and they are just posting the most popular smishing that they are seeing in the data. So this is a limitation of our work because we're not catching all that smishing. So for this reason, right now, we are expanding our work. We need to expand our data set. In particular, we want to make partnerships with other organizations like developers of apps that block spam text because they have a wider range of data. So this is a fantastic question because, yes, this is a limitation of our work, and one way to tackle this limitation is to obtain data from multiple sources, not just depending on data reported by users on social media.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Miguel. Okay, and our final students. So we've had a master's student from Carnegie Mellon, and we had 2 PhD students, and now we are going to close out with our bachelor from Emory-Riddle, Kestrel Carlo, who will be speaking about assessing aviation cybersecurity, general aviation crew aids. Let's hear it.
Thank you. Man, those are some tough acts to follow. It's gonna be hard. All right. So cybersecurity has been expanding exponentially over the last few decades, and virtually every industry has been forced to adapt and transition to these new cyber threats and their consequences. Even modern aircraft use things like internet and other cyber advances for everyday flight operations that we can see. And this expansion also brings new risks and new challenges for the global aviation ecosystem. In the study I present to you today, we aim to look at cybersecurity in the context of increasingly network and digitized components of aviation security. Specifically, we focused on a crew aid called the electronic flight bag. And so the electronic flight bag is a device used by pilots to gain access to things like weather data, flight information, turbulence, and other things that are pertinent to the flight in aircraft. And so historically, this is all done with like physical papers. However, recently has moved electronically, which is where it gets the name electronic flight bag. And so nowadays, pilots will take things like an iPad or iPhone on a plane with them, and then this iPad or EFB will sit in the cockpit with the pilot, and then it hosts an application for the pilot to interact with. So the study that I was talking about assessed the security of a well-known iOS application that's used by pilots globally. Initially in the study, I looked at common EFB characteristics as well as data flows to and from the EFB to help find a potential avenue from attack. And then eventually I found a network connectivity service of the EFB. And this involves controlling the display of air traffic information on the EFB. So one aspect of an EFB is that it can show pilots surrounding air traffic, so like surrounding planes in the area. And this is done through a protocol called Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or in short, ADSB. And so simply put, ADSB is just a plane calculating its own GPS position and then broadcasting that out for anyone else to then receive and use. So in our case, our EFB is intaking other information from other planes, and then it's going to use that on the EFB to show the pilot where all the other planes were on there. So in testing this aspect of the application, I was able to find a specific service. And so I was able to recreate the protocol, the ADSB protocol, that's used to translate ADSB into something that the EFB can actually recognize. And then after recreating this protocol, I was able to automate this process. And so as you can see, I was able to draw my own little traffic planes on the ESB. I don't know if you guys can see that, but all those little light blue dots, all those little light blue triangles are actually recreated planes that I drew. So some background for me is I go to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. It's an aeronautics school, so almost all of my friends are pilots. So after I figured out how to automate this traffic creation, I was sitting in the library one day with one of my friends, and he's got his EFB on the table. He's doing some flight planning for a flight that he has later on in the day, and I kind of wanted to mess with him. So I wanted to draw a smiley face across the continental United States in these little tiny blue dots and these little tiny blue traffic reports. So I crafted the packets that I had created, and then I sent them over to him, and his application actually crashed. And so this told me that either A, there was no limit to the number of planes that the application would try to draw, or if there was, I wasn't able to find it before the application crashed. And so this isn't good. Pilots kind of need to know things like, where they are, if there's a plane heading towards them, things like that in real time. So let me be clear. This attack is really only probable if an attacker can be on the same LAN connection as the EFB. So let me be clear. This attack really isn't possible from if there's not a LAN connection 30,000 feet in the air. There's not that many of those. But if an attacker could gain access to the same LAN connection, this happens frequently in like terminals and things when the pilots are still on the ground, an attacker could crash the app or just prevent it from launching entirely. So we can crash an app used by pilots, right? So what's the real big deal of this? To really understand the impact of this attack, I had to do some research into something called the Airworthiness Security Standards. And so the airworthiness security standards are basically just an aviation term that involves certifying the integrity and availability of data that's transferred between these systems that are required for flight. So in the standard from that relevant to this study, it categorizes either A, reducing safety margins, B, increasing crew workload, C, inconveniencing passengers, or D, creating a routine flight change as a minor safety impact. And so these are all possibilities of a timed in-flight EFB outage. So that means this attack is placed in the minor impact category. And so I say minor impact category because if you guys know about EFBs, they're actually a really heavily redundant system. They're an iPad that they take on the plane, and so they're really used for eased pilot workload rather than an actual safety critical flight system. So at the end of the study, I submitted a vulnerability disclosure to the vendor of this application, and I was notified by them in February of 2023, so this year, that this application, or that this vulnerability was actually patched. And so I've tested this new patch, and I have validated myself that this attack is no longer possible. But the study does pose some interesting questions about the future of aviation security, right? Going back to the airworthiness security standards that I mentioned before, they actually dictate that external dependencies, such as ADS-B or GPS, are assumed trusted by the aircraft itself. But should these external dependencies really be assumed trusted, or should they be analyzed for their secure use within the aircraft? EFBs are just one example of many, many parts of the aviation industry going more and more into paperless operations. And as the aviation industry turns a corner into increasing network devices in the ecosystem, we also have to realize that the more connected we are in the physical world, the more we also have to focus on the safety implications of these cyber attacks. Thank you.
All right, Anne?
Thank you, Kestrel, and I hope you received a bug bounty for that also. One thing before I ask a question, I'm going to say a couple things. There are two things I really liked about the work you presented here. One is that you actually took action, and it wasn't just a study, you took action on. The second thing is that you recognize, we often talk about vulnerabilities in the wild, but the fact you actually have to be on the machine, people don't always talk about that. There's this hyper, oh my gosh, we have this vulnerability, but there's access required before you can actually launch that vulnerability. So thank you for acknowledging that. My question for you is not actually specific to your study here. It's what are you going to do next? Because you identified at the very end of your presentation that there's this whole risk now in the aviation industry as it gets more connected. We drive productivity to pilots by bringing more connected devices on the airplanes. What are you thinking next? What's the next area you're going to target and look at?
Oh man, I have no idea. I'm not great at policy making, but I think if I were to try to fix something like this, looking at the airworthiness security standards, or at least revamping how we look at security in aviation in general is probably a good way to start with that. In terms of what I'm going to study next, I would like to continue to try to test this application. So I tested the TCP/IP version of this attack, but ADS-B is a radio frequency. So I wasn't able to test this because it's technically illegal to broadcast ADS-B illegally. I was looking at doing some research into getting a Faraday cage, but they're really expensive. That being said, if you could broadcast ADS-B, like that many planes, you can create your own, you could just crash this app remotely. So any pilot in the area, I think it's 50 nautical miles, I really should know that, but pretend I do. Yeah, so you could broadcast your own ADS-B and try to crash it. So I would like to, try to continue to keep doing this stuff. I think this is interesting. Thank you for your question.
So the thing that kept going to my head is if I was sitting on the other side and trying to fix this, this is a question of how you're supposed to degrade the system properly, or how the system should behave under degraded security conditions, right? Mm-hmm. And so the question is, are you building the front door of a hospital, or are you building the front door of a bank, right? Mm-hmm. It's like one of those, which do you want to fail open or fail closed or fail what? Did you have a sense when you were doing this what kind of boundaries you would draw in terms of how equipment like this should fail? I'll skip to something else. I played with ADS-B. We talked about this on the side. Yes. You could totally do this by spoofing. There's there's no authentication in the protocol. And there's we can talk offline about some more stuff, but it could totally be done. Yeah. Yeah,
that's a really good question. So I have no idea what kind of boundaries are being drawn. I didn't even get access to I guess I could get access to the binaries of this application. But I think, this application is pretty important for pilots. And so I looked at it under the context of increasing pilot workload. So if a pilot's coming in to land on a plane, they've already got a lot going on. They need to figure out what they need to do. And their EFB crashing on top of that is, really not good. And as I mentioned before, that reduces safety margins. So in the context of your question about how it should fail, I think it should stop drawing it shouldn't crash completely. It might stop drawing external planes that aren't relevant. Maybe limit the nautical miles to something a lot closer. But good question. That's technical.
And then maybe just one comment. When we look at these systems, an EFB is not really built to the same reliability standards as the rest of the aircraft, but reliability and security have a lot of commonality with each other, but they're not exactly the same. Right? Reliability is based on certain probabilistic models of what is likely to happen. Security is based on an attacker, which is always going to push it to the very corner of the model every single time. And so what's also going through my mind is, for people who have to fix these things, where can we take advantage from the fact that the FAA has actually done a really great job of building these frameworks, and where should we realize that there's actually huge gaping holes because we trust certain things mindlessly, just like you said.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really fruitful for future work.
Yeah, that's a great question. If I could just add to that real quick. So I tested, there's a few types of EFBs if people don't know. Some are actually built into the things themselves. And so I tested one that actually wasn't built in. So this is the external, what they call a portable EFB. So it's slightly different, held to different standards. Thank you for your question.
Jamil, if you have one, it's got to be short or at time. So.
I'll just say thank you for doing this. I'm going on a general aviation flight tomorrow, so thank you for getting this fixed. I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable getting up there tomorrow.
Oh, good. Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kestrel.
Thank you.
So thank you. I want a big round of applause for all the students and the judges. Thank you, guys. Thank you all for coming out here. Go have a lovely rest of your conference. The students will be over here if you want to have any further questions about the research, but I hope you enjoyed your time here. Thank you.